You've probably heard of alchemy as the ancient art of turning lead into gold, but that's just the surface of the story. True alchemy is something much deeper, more powerful, and more dangerous. And this secret has crossed centuries, hidden under symbols, metaphors, and encoded writings, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. That moment might be now, might be here, with you. Since ancient Egypt, sages have spoken of the art of transforming not metals, but the very essence of the human being. Imagine men and women working in hidden laboratories, surrounded by scrolls and mysterious instruments, but not just trying to create material wealth. They wanted something greater. They wanted the immortality of the soul. They wanted to understand the hidden mechanisms that move the universe, the invisible laws that shape reality. What few know is that these alchemists were not alone. They were part of a silent lineage, passed through the ages, flowing through the esoteric schools of Greece, the medieval secret orders, the Rosicrucian circles, and the Hermetic treaties that inspired thinkers like Paracelsus, Zosimos, Flamel, and even Isaac Newton. Each generation guarded the teachings of the great work as if it were a sacred fire, not because they were afraid of losing the knowledge, but because they knew it could destroy those who were not ready. The power of alchemy is not in transforming metals, it's in transforming states of consciousness. Think about it. Everything you live, feel, and experience comes from your perception. The alchemist doesn't seek to change the external world without first changing the internal one. They understand that to touch the true gold, the philosophical gold, you must first refine yourself. And this is not an empty metaphor. It's a practical process, lived, felt in everyday life, where each challenge, each pain, each loss works as the fire that burns away the soul's impurities. Why was this hidden from us? Because most people don't really want to change. They want ready-made answers, magical solutions, easy shortcuts. But alchemy demands total surrender. It demands courage to face your own inner demons, to go through the purifying fire without resistance. The ancient alchemists knew that giving this knowledge to someone unprepared would be like handing a sharp sword to a child. Power destroys before it transforms. That's why they hid it, coded it, sealed each part in symbols that only the initiated could decipher. But here's the most important secret. Even if you've never formally studied alchemy, you are already living an alchemical process right now. Every time life tests you, every time you feel like you're falling apart, every time you go through cycles of pain and rebirth, you are, without realizing it, going through stages of the great work. You are in an invisible laboratory where the raw material is not lead but your emotions, your thoughts, your beliefs, your ego. And that's why this topic has never died. It has crossed the ages because it touches something universal in the human being, the desire to go beyond, to understand what's behind matter, to find a greater meaning for existence. Alchemy survives because deep down, we all feel this calling, even if muffled, even if forgotten amidst the noise of the modern world. Pop culture has tried to oversimplify this concept. Books, movies, and series have shown alchemists as wizards obsessed with wealth and power. But true alchemists despised material gold. Physical gold was just a reflection, a symbolic representation of inner gold, awakened consciousness, purified soul, enlightened being. The real work wasn't done in an iron crucible, but in the crucible of the mind itself, where each thought was melted down, analyzed, and recreated. Look around you. Modern society teaches you to look outward. More money, more recognition, more status. But that's just the surface. The ancients knew that true wealth is vibrational, internal. Because when you change inside, the world outside responds. And here is where alchemy touches on something essential. You are not just a spectator of life, you are a co-creator. Whoever understands this understands the true danger of alchemy, because an awakened mind is a mind that can no longer be manipulated. A refined consciousness no longer accepts living on autopilot. A being who has passed through the alchemical fire no longer settles for spinning in the endless cycle of consumption, repetition, and distraction. They want more. They want to know. They want to be. So, get ready. You are about to enter a territory where few have dared to go, because in the next part, we're going to reveal why alchemy is not just a historical curiosity, but a living process that continues to act silently within you, even now, even as you read or hear these words. And once you see this, you will not be able to go back. Have you noticed how certain things keep repeating in your life? How emotional patterns, challenges, pains, and even small details seem to come back in cycles? You think you're just dealing with everyday problems, but in fact, you are going through a deep alchemical process. Even if you've never studied a single line about alchemy, what few understand is that true alchemy happens in ordinary life, in relationships, in falls, in rebuilding. It doesn't require a laboratory. It doesn't require mystical symbols. It doesn't require potions. It only requires that you exist and that you are open to noticing. Imagine every difficult moment in your life as an invisible furnace, burning away impurities you can't see with the naked eye. When you suffer a disappointment, when you lose something that seemed essential, when the ground disappears under your feet, you are in the heat of this transforming fire. Alchemy, at its core, is the process of using apparent chaos as raw material for something new. And that means it doesn't matter if you know the technical terms. It doesn't matter if you've read about the alchemical stages. You're already in the game. The big question is then, whether you are awake enough to use this game in your favor. Have you ever noticed how some life events seem to happen as if they were designed to test you? A financial problem shows up exactly when you start changing your relationship with money. A relationship ends at the exact moment you begin seeking authenticity. A health challenge arises when you decide to take better care of yourself. Coincidence? For the alchemist, never. For an outside observer, life seems random. But for those who understand the hidden processes, each crisis is an opportunity for vibrational reconfiguration. Alchemy shapes your reality because you, consciously or not, are constantly emitting vibrations that attract the right situations to catalyze your transformation. This doesn't mean you attract problems because you want to suffer. It means there's something in you ready to be purified, ready to be raised to a new level. The problem is that most of the time, you don't notice this. You react, get irritated, blame fate, think it's unfair. And as long as you're reacting, you miss the chance to consciously use this process as a true tool for growth. The conscious alchemist asks a very simple question in the face of every pain. What is trying to emerge here? It's not about blame. It's not about punishment. It's about looking beyond the surface. Have you ever felt stuck in a sequence of emotional repetitions? Always choosing the same type of person in relationships, always facing the same difficulties at work, always ending up at the same point when you think you've moved forward? That's alchemy happening behind the scenes. The universe works to show you where there's still impurity, where there's still imbalance. Every unresolved cycle comes back with more intensity until you stop merely surviving and start observing. And this observation isn't passive, it's active. It changes everything. Now let's get to the most practical aspect of this story. How do you start using this everyday alchemy? First, by recognizing that every pain has a hidden core. When something affects you emotionally, instead of reacting immediately, stop. Observe. Feel in your body where the tension is. Ask yourself, what is this cleansing in me? Maybe it's an old belief about worthiness. Maybe a family pattern of self-sabotage. Maybe an illusion you carry about what happiness is. Just the act of bringing this awareness already begins the process of transmutation. And more, understand that the emotions you consider negative, like anger, sadness, frustration, are not system errors. They are alchemical elements. They are the raw material that, when faced head-on, can turn into gold. This takes practice because we've been trained to reject these emotions. We've been trained to silence, to run away, to numb. The alchemist doesn't run. They face it. They transform it. Another essential point: realize how the small decisions of everyday life are disguised alchemical laboratories. When you choose to truly listen to someone instead of just replying out of obligation, you are transmuting indifference into presence. When you decide to be grateful for something simple instead of complaining, you are transmuting scarcity into vibrational abundance. When you choose to tell the truth even when it would be easier to lie, you are transmuting fear into courage. Everything counts. Every small gesture, every small choice adds up to build the reality you live in. And here's the most fascinating point: the more aware you become of this process, the faster it accelerates. What used to take months or years to notice begins to appear before you in days, sometimes hours. Synchronicities increase, the signs become clear, the opportunities for growth show up as explicit invitations. Life begins to speak directly to you, and not because you've become someone special or superior, but because you've stopped walking around asleep. Alchemy shapes your reality because reality responds to your frequency, and your frequency is made up of everything you think, feel, believe, and choose daily. There's no separation between the spiritual me and the practical me. The way you treat a stranger on the street, the energy you put into preparing a meal, the tone of voice you use with the people you love, all of that is vibration. All of that is alchemical raw material. Stay with me, because in the next part, we're going into the heart of the mystery. The 7 portals of alchemy that transform your reality forever, revealing how each of these portals acts as a vibrational key to open new states of consciousness and break the cycles that keep you trapped. And here we begin to cross the first great portal, the moment when alchemy stops being theory and becomes living experience. This is where many give up, because what's about to happen is not comfortable, it's not pretty, and it's not easy. This is the fire of calcination, the fire that consumes everything you believe yourself to be. We're not talking about a physical fire, but an existential, emotional, spiritual fire. A fire that burns in the invisible field of your consciousness, relentlessly burning away the masks, the disguises, the illusions you've built over your life. And it arrives without asking for permission. You feel this fire when life starts to collapse in ways you can't control. Relationships that suddenly end, situations that completely derail your plans, losses, layoffs, abrupt changes. What seemed stable breaks. What seemed safe dissolves. What seemed eternal dies before your eyes. And everything you knew about yourself collapses. This is the first portal, calcination. The moment when the ego screams, trying to keep the old foundation standing, but the universe, relentless, blows the embers of the alchemical fire until everything turns to ashes. The curious thing is that most people see this process as punishment, an injustice, a mistake on the path. They don't realize the fire isn't there to punish, but to reveal what is truly solid, what is truly real, what is truly part of the essence. Because everything that can be burned is not you. It's just a layer. It's just accumulated dirt. When calcination happens, everything that is not essence goes away. And what remains is the naked core, pure, uncomfortable, but real. In practice, this process manifests in moments of life where you are forced to confront truths you've avoided for years. For example, that relationship where you erased yourself to keep the peace. That job that no longer made sense, but that you kept out of fear. That old dream that, deep down, has already died, but that you insisted on holding on to avoid facing the emptiness. Calcination destroys these structures. It forces you to look in the mirror and ask, who am I when everything that defines me disappears? When my social status, my achievements, my masks of success are stripped away, what's left? This is not a gentle moment. It's intense. It's the moment when you feel like the ground has disappeared beneath you. It's the dark night of the soul, as the mystics called it. It's when you realize the old tricks no longer work. You try to fill the void with distraction, with consumption, with external validation, but nothing fits anymore. Because the fire has already burned away the false connections. And now, you are face to face with what you tried to avoid, the raw core of your own existence. The power of calcination lies in transforming suffering into enlightenment. But that only happens when you stop resisting. When you accept that losing is not failing, that falling is not weakness, that letting go is not defeat. The ego will fight to the end to survive. It will create stories, excuses, justifications. It will say, you need to keep this image. You need to keep being that person everyone knows. But alchemy doesn't negotiate with the ego. The process demands that you allow the burn, that you consciously watch the collapse of what isn't true. And here's an important practice. During moments of calcination, take a deep breath and observe. Instead of reacting on autopilot, instead of trying to control, stop. Ask, what is being burned here? What is trying to die so that something new can be born? This simple question shifts you from the role of victim to the role of conscious observer. And this small change in perspective is what separates those who cross the portal from those who stay stuck on the outside. Calcination is not a one-time event. It's a cycle that repeats every time you're ready for a new level of being. Whenever a new version of you needs to emerge, the old will be burned away. That's why you shouldn't be afraid when life seems to fall apart. Understand, the process has already begun. And what comes next is even deeper. Because when everything turns to ash, when the ego loses its last strength, when you completely surrender, the second portal arrives. A portal where the healing waters come to dissolve what's left, washing the ashes, cleaning the wounds, preparing the ground for purification. Get ready, because purification is not just relief. It's a passage that requires vulnerability, surrender, and total openness. When the embers go out and the ground is covered in ashes, you notice something strange. A silence takes over. There's no more fight, no more resistance. Only then do you feel the waters begin to arrive. Slowly, as if coming from within the earth, they appear to surround every part of what remains. This is the second portal, the portal of dissolution. And here it's no longer fire that works, it's water. It's not destruction, it's purification. In this moment, you realize that holding on tightly no longer works. There's nothing left to protect. What once seemed indispensable has already been undone. The second portal invites you to do something the human mind hates: let go of control. And letting go of control is not giving up on life. It's not throwing in the towel, but releasing the illusion that you can control everything. Here begins a much more subtle process. The waters of dissolution work from the inside out. They penetrate deep layers of the psyche. They don't just wash, they dissolve unconscious fears, pains that were buried so long ago you don't even remember they existed, memories you repressed because they hurt too much. No, they don't come to crush you, they come to cleanse you. And this process is not mental, it's visceral. You feel it in your body, you feel it in your breath, you feel it in your soul. The mind, which tries to control everything, fights to the end. It wants to label the process, explain, analyze, understand. But water doesn't respect mental boundaries. It goes around, it crosses, it softens, it dissolves. And you start to realize that the more you resist, the more exhausted you become, until a point comes when something in you finally understands. There's only one way. Surrender to the flow. In practice, this shows up in moments when you realize your defense mechanisms no longer hold. You feel emotions arise without warning, a sadness that has no logical cause, an old fear that suddenly surfaces, an inexplicable longing that invades you in the middle of the day. These are emotional residues coming to the surface to be dissolved. This is the invitation. Instead of fighting these internal waves, allow yourself to feel them. No story, no justification, just feel. A powerful exercise in this phase is to practice conscious breathing. When the emotions come, take a deep breath and say to yourself, I allow this to come. I allow this to pass. Because the secret of dissolution is not in understanding every detail, but in allowing the accumulated energy to follow its natural path of release. The more you hold, the more it accumulates. The more you allow, the more it purifies. Here, intense dreams often appear, childhood memories, recollections of situations you thought were resolved. Don't be scared. This is the work of the inner waters, cleansing the dark corners of your emotional memory. It's as if you're inside a great river, where the waters carry away everything that no longer serves. You don't need to swim against the current. You don't need to collect every little piece that floats by. You just need to trust that the natural movement is cleansing. What happens when you surrender to this process? An inner space begins to appear. A space no longer filled with anxiety, nor with hurry, nor with mental noise. A silent, moist, fertile space. This is the ground where something new can be born later on. But attention! The waters don't distinguish between what you think is good or bad. They simply carry away what no longer has a function, and this can include aspects of your identity that you considered essential. That's why this portal is so challenging. Because it's not just about releasing traumas and pains, but also about releasing roles, titles, images you've created of yourself. Here, there are no more masks. There's only you, naked, before the great liquid mirror of your soul. And this mirror doesn't lie. It shows what is, not what you wish it were. Get ready, because after the water cleanses, comes the decisive moment. In the next portal, you will be called to make deep choices, to separate what should be kept and what must be abandoned forever. A process that requires not only courage, but discernment. Because not everything that survived the fire and the water deserves to move forward. Some things only lasted this long because you weren't yet ready to let them go. But now, there's no more way to postpone. When the waters recede, leaving behind a clean ground, the third portal stands before you, the inevitable moment of separation. Here, there's no more running or postponing. You are faced with the most delicate and, at the same time, most powerful task: discernment. Separating the essential from the disposable. Understanding, with a clarity you've never had before, which parts of you are true and which are just inherited masks, assumed roles, stories that weren't even yours but that you carried for so long you believe they were real. At this stage, something fascinating happens. You begin to realize that much of what you always believed about yourself was built based on external expectations. The phrases you heard as a child, the compliments that shaped your behavior, the criticisms that rooted fears, the family patterns you repeated without noticing. All of this now emerges, before your inner eyes like scattered pieces of a puzzle that no longer fits. And the challenge is to choose. What deserves to stay? What is just dead weight? In practice, this portal demands that you develop a rare skill, the courage to let go of parts of yourself. We're not talking about impulsively abandoning relationships or jobs, but something much deeper. For example, maybe you discover that you've always tried to be the nice person because you learned that pleasing others was the only way to receive love. Or maybe you realize that your relentless ambition didn't come from a genuine desire, but from a desperate need to prove your worth. Separating the essential is looking at these patterns and asking, is this really me? Or is this something I learned to wear? This process can be painful because you will discover that certain things you clung to with all your strength were actually disguised prisons. Maybe that profession that defines your identity no longer represents you. Maybe that family narrative of, "I've always been this way," is no longer sustainable. And all of this begins to reveal itself not as a crisis, but as an opportunity for rediscovery. Because alchemical separation does not destroy who you are. It removes what doesn't belong so you can finally see who you've always been. A practical exercise that can help here is sincere self-analysis. Take a notebook and write down, what characteristics of mine do I consider essential? Which of my behaviors repeat just to please or avoid conflict? What parts of my identity do I maintain out of fear of rejection? This kind of reflection can open powerful doors because it disarms the mind's automatic defenses. It allows you to start recognizing what's being sustained merely by habit and what's aligned with your essence. Another vital point is understanding that not everything that survived the fire and water deserves to be kept. Just because something has made it this far doesn't mean it should move forward. The true alchemist is ruthless in this process. They don't hold on to an idea, a behavior, or a belief just because it's familiar. They observe, weigh, feel. They ask, does this serve my higher purpose? Does this connect me to my truth? Or does it keep me tied to an outdated version of myself? Here, the ego stirs again. It tries to convince you that without certain roles, you will cease to exist. It says you need to keep that mask of being strong, wise, competent, perfect. But something deeper in you is already beginning to understand. Every mask you remove brings you closer to the real core. Every layer you abandon makes space for something new to be born. And it's this space that will prepare the way for the next great portal, because once the essential is separated from the disposable, something extraordinary happens. The moment arrives when the parts that truly matter begin to fuse in a way that has never existed before, generating a completely new, vibrant, authentic identity, free from the weight of old illusions. An identity born not from fear, but from freedom. When you cross the portal of separation, something profound begins to move inside you. It's as if, for the first time, the true pieces that remained after so much fire, so much water, and so much discernment finally find the space to fit together. And then comes the fourth portal, conjunction. This moment is not just a phase of the alchemical process. It's the birth of something you may have never experienced before. It's the birth of the true self, not the idealized self, not the social self, not the self molded by others' expectations, but the self that emerges from the union of internal opposites. Here, the inner alchemist begins to unite masculine and feminine, light and shadow, reason and emotion, action and receptivity. These forces no longer fight inside you. They begin to dance together, as if they finally understand that they are not enemies, but parts of the same whole. You realize you no longer need to deny one side to strengthen the other. That being strong doesn't mean being cold. That being sensitive doesn't mean being fragile. That logic and intuition can walk side by side. building a much wiser path than any isolated extremism. In practice, this stage begins to appear in your small daily gestures. You find yourself responding to a provocation no longer with reactivity, but with presence. You realize you no longer need to prove anything to anyone, not even to yourself. You start to notice that your decisions no longer come solely from calculated reason or emotional impulse, but from a deeper place where these two forces work together. Conjunction gives you access to a new intelligence, integrated intelligence. A powerful exercise here is to begin observing how these opposites live within you. Notice, when you are very rational, where is your emotion? When you are very emotional, where is your reason? When you're forcing too much, where is your ability to let go? When you surrender too much, where is your sense of direction? This conscious observation, without judgment, allows you to begin bringing harmony inside. Don't try to force balance, just observe, and you will naturally start to notice internal movements seeking to meet each other. This is also the portal where many begin to feel an increase in vital energy. Why? Because when opposites unite, they generate life. In alchemical symbolism, this fusion is represented by the alchemical marriage, where the inner king and queen unite to generate the golden child, the awakened consciousness. It's no exaggeration to say that, at this stage, you are reborn to yourself. You are no longer a mosaic of disconnected parts. You are a whole being, pulsing in a harmony that overflows into the world around you. But pay attention. Conjunction doesn't mean that everything will be resolved or perfect. It simply means that you've entered a new state of being, a state where your internal conflicts no longer paralyze you, but become fuel to create something greater. A state where you start walking through the world no longer as someone lost searching for themselves, but as someone who carries within an invisible compass, pointing toward a north only you can follow. This moment is deeply transformative because it brings with it a sense of authenticity that no longer depends on external validation. You begin to realize that you don't need to be what others expect. You feel, almost physically, that you have permission to exist exactly as you are, without shaping every gesture, every choice, every word to fit molds that were never meant for you. And when that happens, something magical begins to manifest. You become magnetic. Not because you're trying, but because authenticity generates presence, and presence attracts. In everyday life, this portal invites you to practice something very simple but powerful. Choose to act from your center. Before making a decision, ask yourself, is this coming from the fusion of my being or from a fragmented piece trying to control everything? When you respond to someone, notice, am I speaking from my ego or from my integrated essence? Small questions like these adjust your actions and expand your inner alignment. But be careful, don't fool yourself into thinking the journey ends here. The fourth portal opens the door to a whole new level. Because once you experience this state of inner unity, you start noticing signs around you that once went unnoticed. You see coincidences that aren't coincidences. You receive inspirations that seem to come from another plane. You feel that something greater is beginning to guide you. And this is the call of the fifth portal, a level where spiritual inspiration and synchronicities begin to take over your path, showing that internal alchemy isn't just about transforming yourself, but also about aligning with a greater purpose waiting for you outside. Crossing the portal of conjunction, you feel something that can't be explained by the mind. There's a new vibration in the air, a subtle energy that seems to gently push you forward. It's as if life begins to whisper in your ear, pointing directions, bringing encounters, opening doors you didn't even know existed. This is the fifth portal, fermentation. Here, it's no longer just about your personal effort. Something greater has entered the game, something that comes from the invisible, from the spiritual, from the field that connects everything. In alchemy, fermentation marks the moment when the process receives a vital breath. After dissolving, separating, and uniting, now it's time for something to ferment, grow, and gain a life of its own. You are no longer an isolated piece. You are connected to the flow. You start noticing signs you used to miss. A book falling off the shelf open to a specific page, a phrase you hear on the street that answers exactly the doubt tormenting you, an improbable coincidence leading you to a new opportunity. These aren't accidents, they're synchronicities. Carl Jung describes synchronicity as the principle of meaningful connection between external and internal events. It's not cheap magic or superstition. It's the visible manifestation of what's aligned in the invisible. And here, in the fifth portal, you begin to clearly see that the more aligned you are with your true self, the more these synchronicities show up as confirmations on your path. In practice, this requires attention and surrender. Attention to notice the signs because they never shout, they whisper, and surrender not to try to control everything with your logical mind. Imagine someone trying to plan every detail of their life as if they could predict the future. That's not the path of fermentation. Here, you learn to combine action with openness, direction with flexibility. You chart paths, but leave space for the unexpected. You make plans, but allow the divine to refine them. A simple and powerful practice to live this stage is cultivating inner listening. Set aside 5 minutes a day to simply sit in silence and ask your heart, what do I need to know today? Don't expect to hear a clear voice or an exact answer. Just open the internal space and stay attentive during the day. Sometimes the answer will come in someone's glance, in a song that suddenly plays, in a sudden feeling of clarity. The Spirit works in subtlety. It doesn't impose, it inspires. Another essential aspect here is learning to trust your intuition. Intuition isn't a guess or a wish. It's a deep knowing, without immediate logic, but with a precision you only understand afterward. And to strengthen this connection, you need to practice. Start paying attention to small impulses, calling someone, changing your path, saying something you felt in the moment. The more you act on these small, aligned impulses, the stronger and more reliable your intuition becomes. In this portal, many begin to notice an increase in energy. It's not ordinary physical energy, it's a vibration, an inner excitement that makes you feel something new is being born even if you don't know exactly what. It's the touch of the divine, the breath of creation, entering the alchemical process to shape the new version of who you are becoming. But pay attention. This isn't the end. The fifth portal prepares you for another level of purification. Because this powerful energy, this spiritual inspiration, this creative force needs to be kept clean, crystal clear. Without that, it gets contaminated, lost, dissipated. That's why the sixth portal arrives, distillation, where your essence will be filtered and refined once again, preparing you to carry this divine energy with even more clarity and purpose. As you feel the synchronicities flowing, as if life itself is conspiring in your favor, the urgent need arises to keep this energy alive, clean, precise. This is where the sixth portal opens before you, distillation. This isn't just a technical moment in the alchemical process. It's an intense polishing, a refinement that goes beyond any previous transformation. Because now you're no longer just eliminating the rough impurities of the past. Now, you're purifying what already seems pure, extracting the truest essence of everything that remains. Imagine a rare perfume. It's not enough to just mix flowers and oils. It needs to be distilled, layer by layer, to reach a fragrance that not only smells good, but reveals the soul of what it carries. That's the work of the alchemist at this stage. They don't accept residue, not even the invisible kind. They know that even the spiritual ego, the one that pretends humility but craves recognition, needs to be dissolved. Even the most subtle illusions, the ones that say, now you're special, now you're evolved, now you're above others, need to be distilled away, because here, there's no room for refined masks, only for the living essence. In daily life, this process can be felt when you start noticing small, disguised vanities in your actions. For example, you share a spiritual achievement on social media because you want to inspire others, but deep down, there's a little desire for approval. You help someone and feel genuine joy, but at the same time, you also feel a bit proud to be someone who helps. These residues aren't mistakes. They're part of the journey. But in distillation, the work is to notice these subtleties and clear them, not out of shame, but out of love for authenticity. A powerful practice here is silent self-questioning. At the end of the day, close your eyes and observe. What was my real intention behind my actions? It doesn't matter what answer you gave on the surface. What matters is diving deep until you find the most subtle point where the ego hides. And when you find it, take a deep breath and let it go. Don't fight it. Don't blame yourself. Just release it. Distillation is done with patience and precision, not violence. Another essential detail of this portal is understanding that the work isn't only internal. It also reflects in external choices. Start observing everything you consume: conversations, information, environments, relationships. What lifts your vibration? What dulls your clarity? The alchemist knows that to maintain the distilled state, they need to choose consciously even the small details of daily life. This might mean reducing time spent with certain kinds of content that feed judgment, comparison, distraction. It means seeking silence where there used to be noise. It means choosing quality over quantity, depth over superficiality. This isn't a quick stage. It's a refinement that can last days, months, years, because it follows every new level you reach. But the most beautiful part of this portal is that it prepares you for something that can't be put into common words. It prepares you for the peak of the journey, the encounter with the Philosopher's Stone. That moment when everything that was burned, dissolved, separated, united, fermented, and distilled finally reveals its true form. After the long refinement of distillation, you feel a deep pause. It's not an empty pause. It's a silence full of presence, as if the whole universe is holding its breath, waiting for something grand to happen. And it's exactly here that the seventh portal opens: coagulation, the peak of the alchemical journey. That moment many call enlightenment, but that might be even simpler and, at the same time, deeper than any word can explain. Because coagulation isn't a destination, it's not an external achievement, it's not something you can show off or prove to others. Coagulation is a state of being. It's when you finally become living gold. What does that mean in practice? It means that everything that was burned, dissolved, separated, united, fermented, and distilled now crystallizes into a new identity. An identity not based on masks, social roles, achievements, or failures, but on pure presence. You're no longer trying to prove anything, no longer desperately searching for answers outside yourself. You are. You exist in fullness, in wholeness. You no longer need to chase happiness because you realize you are already joy in motion. You no longer need to seek validation because you realize you already carry the spark of the divine within. It's at this stage that the ancient alchemists said the Philosopher's Stone is found, not as a physical object hidden in some secret vault, but as a state of consciousness that transforms everything it touches. The lead of doubts turns into the gold of wisdom. The weight of past pains turns into lightness. Inner scarcity gives way to a quiet abundance that doesn't depend on external circumstances. You can walk through chaos and still maintain serenity. You can face challenges and still feel gratitude, because the gold you carry now cannot be corroded. In daily life, living coagulation is feeling a confidence that doesn't need to shout. It's being whole in every simple gesture. When you listen to someone, you truly listen. When you act without masks. When you love without fear. Not because you've eliminated all ego, after all, it will always exist in some form, but because now it no longer controls you. It's an assistant, not a tyrant. The mind has become an instrument, not a prison. A powerful practice to recognize if you are accessing this state is effortless self-observation. During the day, gently ask yourself, am I reacting automatically, or am I responding with presence? When you start to notice that your actions, even the small ones, carry intentionality, clarity, and serenity, you are living coagulation. And this doesn't mean you've become perfect or that you'll never face difficulties again. It simply means that you're aligned with the essential flow of life, that you live from a stable center, no longer lost in emotional tides or mental labyrinths. This portal is powerful because it marks a rebirth. A new self is born, not as an invention, but as a revelation of what has always been there, waiting to emerge. And here's the most fascinating detail. Even upon reaching the Philosopher's Stone, even upon arriving at this peak, the true alchemist knows the journey doesn't end. They know that life is made of cycles and that every ending is just an invitation to a new beginning. And so, when you think you've reached the peak, that you've finally arrived at the point where nothing else needs to be done, life itself whispers back, it's not over yet. Because here's the secret few realize. True alchemy was never about reaching a definitive end. It was never about crossing a finish line and raising an invisible trophy. It has always been about entering the eternal cycle of conscious transformation. The truly awakened alchemist understands that the seventh portal is not a throne where they sit to be adored, but a revolving door that takes them back to the beginning, only at a higher, subtler, deeper level. In nature, everything pulses in cycles. The moon waxes and wanes, the tides rise and fall, the day gives way to night, which in turn makes room for the dawn. Even the human body breathes in this rhythm. Inhale, exhale, inhale again. It's the same with inner work. When you reach coagulation, the final phase, you realize that it's actually the start of a new stage, not because you failed, but because you awakened. Every transformation you achieve reveals new levels of refinement. What once seemed resolved now shows itself in a new light. What seemed purified now asks for a more delicate polishing. What seemed like absolute truth now gains new layers of meaning. In daily life, this endless cycle shows up in small situations you thought you'd already overcome. Maybe you worked deeply on your patience, but in a new context, something provokes you unexpectedly. Maybe you overcame old fears, but now a new challenge appears, calling you to expand your courage even more. This is the eternal invitation of alchemy, to look at every moment in life as part of the great work. There are no trivial situations, no useless stages. Every detail, every interaction, every emotion you feel is raw material for your process. A powerful practical exercise here is developing the ability of compassionate observation. Instead of judging your setbacks or small failures as regressions, learn to see them as mirrors revealing where you can still grow. Ask yourself, what is this situation trying to teach me? Where are there still residues to be worked on? This soft yet firm perspective keeps you moving, prevents you from getting stuck in the illusion that you've already arrived at some final destination. And more. The awakened alchemist begins to understand that this cycle is not just personal. It expands to the collective, to humanity, to the earth. Every individual transformation reverberates in the surrounding field. When you raise your frequency, when you purify your energy, you contribute to the vibrational refinement of the planet. This understanding creates a greater sense of purpose. It's not just about you, but about everything you influence with your presence. And here we arrive at one of the most surprising discoveries of the alchemical journey. Enlightenment is not a finish line, not a badge you pin on your chest saying, "I made it," nor a fixed state where everything turns into eternal peace and you become immune to life's challenges. On the contrary, true enlightenment is alive, pulsing, changeable. It is a practice, and like any practice, it requires consistency. It's not about lighting a flame and believing it will stay lit on its own. It's about learning to feed it every day with simple gestures, conscious choices, mindful attention. The ego is a silent master in the art of rebuilding old traps. You may have experienced moments of awakening so deep that you felt the ground vanish under your feet, may have cried upon realizing hidden truths, may have felt your heart open like never before. But the ego is patient. It waits. It watches. And when you lower your guard, it begins to rebuild its old tricks. It stirs up old fears, reignites doubts, whispers familiar stories of inadequacy, of insufficiency, of failure. It reminds you of old wounds and tries to convince you to put back on that emotional armor you worked so hard to remove. That's why the secret of maintenance doesn't lie in reaching a perfect state, but in always returning, even when you stumble. It's accepting that there will be days when you feel fully aligned, but also days when you get lost. And that's okay. What matters is the practice. What matters is that even after a stumble, you take a deep breath and return to center. In practice, this means choosing a daily anchor. And here, it doesn't have to be anything complex or esoteric. It can be a short 5-minute meditation where you simply close your eyes and feel the breath passing through your nostrils without trying to change anything. It can be a moment before bed where you place your hand on your chest, take a deep breath, and tell yourself, "I accept myself exactly as I am." It can be upon waking up, looking in the mirror, and reminding yourself, "I am a conscious co-creator of my reality." The essential thing is not the form, but the consistency. The human brain is trainable, and repetition is what shapes the internal circuits. The more you repeat an aligned practice, the more it becomes part of your being. And here's a precious detail. Don't seek perfection. The conditioned mind loves to turn even spirituality into a battlefield, where you pressure yourself to be flawless, always present, always elevated. That's just another ego trap, disguised as spiritual demand. The true commitment is with gentleness. It's the ability to forgive yourself quickly, to laugh at your own stumbles, to remember that even in the middle of a fall, you can still choose to get up. Over time, you begin to realize that this daily practice isn't just for you. Something bigger starts to move. The energy you sustain, the vibration you emanate, the field you feed, all of this begins to touch the world around you. And that's exactly where we'll enter in the next part, where the impact of the true alchemist becomes a force that transcends the individual and begins to transform the collective. And it's exactly here that the awakened alchemist starts to perceive something fundamental. They don't need to give fiery speeches or carry invisible banners declaring their evolution. The true power of transformation doesn't lie in words. It lies in the silent vibration they sustain as they walk through the world. It's not about convincing anyone. It's not about preaching. It's not about wanting to save or fix others. The alchemist doesn't push truths. They simply live their own truth. They occupy spaces with an energy so coherent, so clean, and so aligned that this vibration becomes a natural invitation for transformation. Without saying anything, they plant invisible seeds in the energetic field around them. Think about how you've already felt this at some point. You know that person who walks into a room and immediately shifts the atmosphere, not because they speak loudly or draw attention, but because they carry a different presence? You can't explain it, but you feel it. Maybe a contagious calm, maybe a quiet strength, maybe a silent joy. That's the magic of the alchemist in the world. They don't need to do, they need to be. And by being, they transform. In practice, this means paying attention to how you enter spaces. When you walk into a room, into a meeting, into a tense situation, take a deep breath for a moment. Ask yourself, what energy am I bringing with me right now? Is it anger, anxiety, rushing, or is it clarity, presence, peace? This self-awareness is not an exercise in self-judgment, but of alignment. When you adjust your own vibration, even silently, you affect the field around you. This doesn't mean you'll never feel difficult emotions again, but that you learn not to dump those emotions onto others unconsciously. You welcome them, observe them, and choose what energy to offer the world in that moment. And here's the powerful part. This transformation doesn't depend on you convincing anyone. When you try to change others by force, you create resistance. When you transform yourself from within and live from this new alignment, you become a mirror for others, showing them possibilities they might never have considered. Some people will come closer, curious. Others might pull away, uncomfortable with the change. And that's okay. The alchemist does not seek approval, they seek internal coherence. They know that every step they take, consciously, plants invisible waves in the collective field. And here arises a crucial point, which will be the focus of the next part. When you understand this level of influence, you also understand that you can no longer act on autopilot, because every thought, every word, every action becomes an act of conscious co-creation. And this brings with it a new weight, the responsibility of knowing that you are not just transforming yourself, but impacting everything around you. When you awaken to the awareness that you are co-creating your reality every second, something profound happens. You can no longer blame bad luck, the government, your partner, your family, your boss, or the weather. You realize that even when you don't consciously choose, you are choosing, because the universe responds to your vibration, not to your excuses. This doesn't mean you start controlling everything like an all-powerful magician. It means you begin to understand where your real power lies, in the field of vibrational responsibility. Every thought, word, and gesture you emit creates waves in the invisible field of existence, and these waves inevitably return to you. Being a conscious co-creator is not about seeking perfection, but about acting with integrity, knowing that every little intention counts. In practice, choose one area of your life to explore. Don't try to take on everything at once. Focus on something specific, like your relationships, your work, or your body. Ask yourself honestly, what have I been co-creating here? What patterns do I keep repeating? What results do I attract over and over? And here comes the most powerful alchemical movement. Create small, intentional acts. Don't underestimate the impact of simple gestures. If you want more authentic relationships, practice speaking a gentle truth in every encounter. If you want better health, turn the act of applying lotion or preparing your food into a ritual of gratitude for your body. Small gestures, when done with intention, have an alchemical power that alters the overall frequency of your energy field. When you take on this power, inevitably, a greater calling begins to vibrate within you. Are you ready to cross the final portal, The final portal doesn't open because you've accumulated a lot of knowledge, or because you've memorized spiritual books, or because you've listened to 1,000 lectures. It only opens when you make a true decision. This decision no one can make for you. It doesn't matter if you have a master, a mentor, a guide. There comes a moment when you understand that everything, absolutely everything, is an internal choice. Remaining stagnant or crossing to the next level depends only on you. And to strengthen this decision, I recommend a symbolic act of commitment. Take paper and pen and write a letter to yourself, starting with the words, "I choose to cross the portal because..." Describe sincerely where you want to grow, what old habits you are ready to let go of, what new version of yourself is emerging. Keep this letter in a special place, not because it has any external magical power, but because this gesture ritualizes the decision in the vibrational field, aligning you to truly move forward. If you've made it this far, I want to ask you something. Share in the comments which portal touched you the most, which part of this journey moved you most deeply. When you write, you anchor your energy, and when you share, you inspire others to awaken too. Oh, and there's one more amazing update. The Hermetic Codex has a project expanding into other languages. If you understand Spanish or have friends who prefer to follow along in that language, click on the video now appearing on the screen and subscribe to our Spanish channel. There, we will continue this journey, expanding Hermetic wisdom far beyond language barriers. Don't leave yet. Click on the video on the screen right now and let's meet there. I'll be waiting for you on the other side.